Let me ask you something powerful. How many times have you told yourself, this is it, I'm done, I've failed too many times? How many moments have you stood in the wreckage of a dream and thought this was the final chapter? Here's the truth most people never realize: a failure is not a dead end, it's feedback. And the moment you understand that, your entire life can change. Failure is only permanent when you decide to stop. Until then, it's simply a signal, a message saying adjust, grow, shift, rise. But most people don't hear the message. They personalize the failure. They say, I failed, so I must be a failure. And that belief becomes the prison that keeps them small. You see, life doesn't happen to you. It happens for you if you're willing to learn from it. Every setback carries a lesson. Every breakdown carries a breakthrough. The question is not, why did this happen? The question is, what is this trying to teach me? Think about this: success doesn't shape character, struggle does. Pain refines you. Pressure reveals who you really are. And failure forces growth if you refuse to quit. The strongest people you admire didn't avoid failure, they used it. They leveraged it. They allowed it to sharpen them instead of shatter them. Most people quit because they attach emotion to the moment. They feel embarrassed, ashamed, discouraged, but emotions are temporary. Decisions are permanent. Don't make a permanent decision based on a temporary feeling. You are far more capable than the story you're telling yourself right now. Here's another truth that will set you free: failure is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of your strategy, and strategies can change. Skills can be learned, muscles can be strengthened, mindsets can be rewired. But if you confuse failure with identity, you'll never move forward. Ask better questions. Instead of, why am I like this? Ask, what's missing? Why can't I do it? Ask, how can I improve? The quality of your life is determined by the quality of your questions. Change the question, change the focus. Change the focus, change the result. Understand this deeply: growth requires discomfort. If you're not failing, you're not stretching. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not evolving. Every level of success demands a new version of you. And that version is forged in moments when things don't go your way. You don't fail because you're weak. You fail because you tried. And trying means you're alive, engaged, moving forward. The only true failure is refusing to rise again. The only real defeat is deciding you're done before the lesson is complete. Your past does not define your future unless you live there. What happened yesterday is information, not a life sentence. You can use it as fuel or allow it to weigh you down. The choice is always yours. And the moment you take responsibility, not blame, responsibility, you take your power back. Stand up. Reset your posture, change your physiology. When you move your body with certainty, your mind follows. Strength is not just mental, it's physical. Act strong and you'll feel strong. Act decisive and clarity will come. Remember, this life rewards action, not perfection. Progress beats perfection every single time. Take the next step, even if it's imperfect. Momentum is created by movement, not by waiting until you feel ready. You don't become confident and then act. You act and confidence is built. Failure is not the end of your story. It's the chapter that makes the comeback meaningful. One day you'll look back and realize this moment didn't break you, it built you. It didn't stop you, it prepared you. So don't quit, don't shrink, don't settle for the lie that this is all you are. Decide today that failure is not your identity, it's your training ground. Rise again with more clarity, more hunger, and more determination than ever before. Because the moment you refuse to quit, failure loses its power. And the moment you decide to rise, your future begins. Failure is not a verdict on who you are, it is information about what you tried. Most people see failure as a stop sign, but in reality, it is a signal pointing you toward adjustment and growth. When something doesn't work, life is giving you data. It is showing you what approach is ineffective, what belief is limiting you, or what skill still needs to be developed. The moment you treat failure as feedback instead of punishment, you reclaim your power and stop letting circumstances define your confidence. People who stay stuck don't fail more than others. They interpret failure differently. They make it personal. They say, this didn't work because I'm not good enough, and that story becomes heavier than the event itself. But failure never attacks your worth, it only challenges your strategy. Strategies can be changed, strengthened, and improved, but if you label yourself as the failure, you shut down the very creativity and energy required to move forward. Every successful breakthrough is built on layers of feedback. Athletes review their losses to see where their form broke down. Entrepreneurs analyze what didn't sell to understand the market more clearly. Leaders reflect on difficult moments to sharpen their emotional intelligence. Feedback is what makes progress possible, and failure is simply feedback delivered with intensity. It grabs your attention so you are forced to grow. When you avoid failure, you also avoid expansion. Staying safe may protect your ego, but it shrinks your potential. Growth requires experimentation, and experimentation guarantees mistakes. The people who win long-term are not the ones who avoid falling, but the ones who fall, learn quickly, and adjust faster than everyone else. They ask empowering questions like what worked, what didn't, and what must change now. Emotional reactions often distort the message of failure. Disappointment, embarrassment, and frustration are natural, but they are temporary. If you allow emotion to define meaning, you will misread the lesson. The real skill is separating what happened from who you are. Once you do that, clarity replaces self-doubt and action becomes possible again. Feedback only has value when it is used. Ignored feedback repeats itself, often with more force. Life will keep presenting the same challenge until the lesson is learned. When you listen, adapt, and take responsibility for improvement, failure stops being painful and starts becoming productive. It becomes a tool that sharpens focus, builds resilience, and strengthens belief in your ability to figure things out. Your identity is the story you repeat to yourself about who you are and what you're capable of, and mistakes have a way of trying to rewrite that story in a negative direction. One setback happens and suddenly the mind jumps to conclusions, labeling you as weak, unlucky, or incapable. But a mistake is an event, not a definition. What you did is not who you are, yet most people fuse the two together and carry that false label for years. When you allow mistakes to define your identity, you shrink your future to the size of your past. You stop taking risks because you don't want to confirm the story you've been telling yourself. This is how potential quietly dies, not through one failure, but through the meaning attached to it. The truth is, every human who has ever achieved something meaningful has made mistakes that could have stopped them if they had chosen to identify with them. Identity works like a thermostat. It regulates what you believe is normal and possible for you. If you see yourself as someone who always messes things up, you will unconsciously sabotage opportunities to stay consistent with that belief. Not because you're broken, but because the mind seeks familiarity over growth. Change begins the moment you challenge that identity and replace it with a more empowering one. Mistakes are evidence of effort, not proof of inadequacy. They show that you were engaged, stretching beyond comfort, attempting something that mattered. If you never make mistakes, it's a sign you are playing small. The people who grow the most are often the ones who fail in public, learn quickly, and refuse to internalize the outcome. They keep their sense of self intact while upgrading their skills. Separating identity from performance is one of the most powerful mental shifts you can make. Performance fluctuates based on strategy, energy, focus, and experience. Identity, when consciously chosen, becomes stable and resilient. You can say, I am someone who learns, adapts, and persists even when results are not immediate. That belief creates emotional strength during difficult moments. The language you use with yourself matters more than the mistake itself. Saying, I failed, feels final, while saying, this attempt failed, keeps the future open. One statement locks the door, the other invites improvement. Over time, these small shifts in language rewire how you see yourself and what you attempt. When identity is grounded in growth instead of perfection, mistakes lose their power to discourage. They become part of the process rather than a reason to stop. You begin to trust yourself not because you're flawless, but because you know you can recover, learn, and move forward regardless of the outcome. Every setback carries information, even when it feels unfair or overwhelming. What most people call bad luck is often an unexamined lesson. When something falls apart, it exposes weaknesses that success tends to hide. It shows where preparation was incomplete, where expectations were unrealistic, or where focus drifted. If you are willing to look closely, setbacks become teachers that reveal exactly what must change for the next level of growth. The problem is not the setback itself, but the reaction to it. Many people rush to escape the discomfort instead of extracting the lesson. They distract themselves, blame circumstances, or search for someone to fault. In doing so, they miss the opportunity to evolve. Growth requires reflection, and reflection requires the courage to sit with discomfort long enough to understand it. Setbacks slow you down so you can see what you were previously moving too fast to notice. They force honesty. You can no longer rely on assumptions or ego. You are pushed to ask real questions about your habits, your standards, and your level of commitment. This clarity is uncomfortable, but it is also powerful because it points directly to the changes that will produce better results. Every meaningful improvement begins with awareness. A setback brings awareness by contrast. It shows you what doesn't work so you can narrow your focus on what does. Without these moments, progress would be random and shallow. The people who advance the fastest are not the ones who avoid problems, but the ones who analyze them without judgment and act on what they discover. There is also a hidden emotional lesson in every setback. It reveals how you handle pressure, uncertainty, and disappointment. Do you shut down, or do you stay engaged? Do you become defensive, or do you become curious? These reactions matter because they shape your long-term resilience. Each setback is an opportunity to strengthen emotional control and mental flexibility. When lessons are ignored, setbacks repeat themselves in different forms. The same patterns show up in relationships, work, and personal goals until the message is finally received. Life is persistent in this way. It will keep testing the same area until growth occurs. Learning the lesson the first time saves time, energy, and unnecessary pain. Extracting lessons requires responsibility, not blame. Responsibility puts you in the position of power because it focuses on what you can influence. Once you identify the lesson, action becomes clear. Adjust the approach, raise the standard, acquire the skill, or change the environment. This is how setbacks transform into stepping stones and how growth becomes intentional rather than accidental. The direction of your life is shaped by the questions you ask yourself every day. In moments of failure or pressure, the brain automatically searches for meaning. If the questions are disempowering, the answers will be limiting. Asking, why does this always happen to me, trains the mind to look for weakness, excuses, and reasons to stop. That single question can drain energy and lock you into a victim mindset without you even realizing it. Empowering questions create a completely different internal experience. When you ask, "What can I learn from this?" or "What needs to change right now?" your focus shifts from blame to solutions. The problem doesn't disappear, but your relationship with it changes. Instead of feeling trapped, you begin to feel resourceful. The quality of the question determines the quality of the emotional state, and your emotional state determines the actions you take. Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they stay stuck in unproductive thinking patterns. The mind will always answer whatever question you give it. If you ask poor questions, it will give you poor answers. If you ask powerful questions, it will search for options, strategies, and possibilities. This is how mental momentum is created even in difficult circumstances. Questions also shape perception. Two people can experience the same setback and walk away with completely different outcomes based on what they ask themselves. One person asks, "Why am I not good enough?" and loses confidence. The other asks, "What skill must I develop next?" and gains clarity. The event is the same, but the result is entirely different because of the internal dialogue. Better questions lead to better decisions. When your questions are focused on growth, your brain prioritizes learning over fear. This reduces emotional overwhelm and increases clarity. Instead of reacting impulsively, you begin to respond intentionally. Over time, this habit strengthens self-trust and resilience. The most powerful questions are simple and direct. What is working? What is not working? What am I willing to do differently? These questions cut through confusion and point straight to action. They bring honesty without self-judgment and accountability without shame. Asking better questions is a skill that can be practiced and refined. The more consistently you challenge disempowering questions and replace them with constructive ones, the more control you gain over your focus and emotions. This internal discipline compounds over time, quietly transforming challenges into opportunities and uncertainty into direction. Most people wait for perfect conditions before they move, believing that clarity, confidence, or motivation must come first. This habit keeps them stuck because perfection is an illusion. Progress is created through movement, not through waiting. Action generates feedback, and feedback creates improvement. When you prioritize progress over perfection, you give yourself permission to grow instead of demanding flawless performance from the start. Perfectionism often disguises itself as high standards, but in reality it is fear in a polished form. It fears judgment, failure, and discomfort. By insisting on getting everything right before taking a step, you delay learning and avoid the very experiences that build competence. Progress, on the other hand, embraces imperfection as part of the process. It accepts that mistakes are not signs of weakness, but signs of momentum. Action has a powerful psychological effect. The moment you take even a small step forward, your emotional state begins to change. Confidence does not appear before action, it is built through action. Each attempt strengthens belief in your ability to figure things out. Waiting to feel ready keeps confidence out of reach, while acting despite uncertainty pulls it closer. Progress also creates clarity. Thinking alone rarely produces solutions. It is through doing that you discover what works and what doesn't. When you take action, the path reveals itself step by step. This is why movement is more valuable than over-planning. Direction improves as you move, not before you move. Small, consistent actions outperform big, delayed ones. Perfectionism aims for a dramatic leap, but progress relies on steady steps. These steps may feel insignificant in the moment, but over time they compound into meaningful change. Consistency builds trust in yourself, and that trust fuels long-term success. There is also freedom in choosing progress. You stop measuring yourself by unrealistic standards and start measuring yourself by effort and improvement. This shift reduces pressure and increases persistence. Instead of quitting when things aren't perfect, you adapt and continue. Life rewards those who are willing to act, learn, and adjust quickly. Progress creates momentum, and momentum creates opportunities. The willingness to move forward imperfectly separates those who dream from those who grow, because growth is always messy, uncertain, and in motion. True strength is not revealed in moments of ease, it is revealed in moments of recovery. Anyone can feel confident when things are going well, but resilience is built when you are tested and choose to stand back up. Rising after failure requires more than motivation, it requires a shift in how you view adversity. Instead of seeing failure as a signal to stop, you begin to see it as an invitation to become stronger. Every time you rise after falling, you send a message to your mind that you are capable of enduring discomfort. This builds internal certainty. The body remembers resilience just as it remembers fear. Each act of recovery conditions your nervous system to respond with courage rather than avoidance. Over time, this becomes a habit, and habits shape character. Strength is not about avoiding emotional pain. It is about moving through it without losing direction. When failure happens, emotions naturally surge. The key is not to suppress them, but to prevent them from dictating your identity or decisions. By acknowledging the feeling and still taking constructive action, you transform pain into power. Rising again also requires responsibility. Responsibility is not self-blame, it is ownership. It asks what can be done now rather than who is at fault. This perspective restores control and reduces helplessness. When you take responsibility, options appear. When you blame, options disappear. Each comeback builds confidence that cannot be taken away. Confidence built from success alone is fragile, but confidence built from recovery is durable. You begin to trust yourself not because outcomes are guaranteed, but because you know you can handle whatever happens. This trust becomes a foundation for bold decisions and sustained effort. Failure often strips away illusions. It forces you to confront reality, adjust expectations, and strengthen skills. When you rise with honesty and humility, you return stronger, wiser, and more focused. This process deepens discipline and sharpens awareness. The ability to rise again is a muscle that grows with use. The more you practice recovery, the faster you rebound. Over time, setbacks lose their power to intimidate because you have proven to yourself that falling is temporary, but quitting is optional.